Alice's world is quiet, small, and meticulously controlled, because that's the only way she knows how to breathe. Kai crashes into it like a windstorm in hiking boots, dripping with stories and chaos and the kind of freedom that terrifies her. She plans every minute. He lives for the unplanned. But when a cautious bookseller with anxiety falls for a wild-hearted traveler who never stays still, both will have to decide if love can survive between fear and flight, or if the middle path they never knew they needed is where the real adventure begins. Hello family, welcome to Story Time with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The morning light filtered through gauzy curtains as Alice stirred in her bed, a tangle of blankets curled protectively around her. Her alarm clock ticked softly on the nightstand, its digital face reading 7 a.m. sharp. She never hit snooze. Snoozing was unpredictable. Snoozing led to late starts, rushing, forgotten things, and spiraling thoughts that choked the rest of the day. She sat up, breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it for 7, then exhaling slowly for 8. The 4-7-8 breath. One of many tools in her arsenal. Alice didn't call herself broken. She had worked hard not to. But she recognized her own wiring. Her anxiety wasn't always loud or obvious. It crept in like fog, thickening around the simplest of decisions, the smallest social interactions, until she felt like she might vanish inside it. Padding to the kitchen, she moved in quiet ceremony. 1 scoop of coffee, 2.5 teaspoons of sugar, half a cup of oat milk steamed, not too hot. The mug she chose had a small chip in it, which once would have been unacceptable, but she'd learned to let that one slide. Progress, her therapist called it. Her apartment was small but curated like a gallery. Books stacked in color-coded towers. Blankets folded with crisp corners. A shelf of herbal teas organized by time of day and stress level. From the outside, it might have looked charming, but Alice knew every placement was a defense, a way to say I know this world, and it won't surprise me here. At 8:10, she left for work. The bookstore was just 5 blocks away. She always walked the same route, right on Birch, left on Juniper, cross with the light at Maple. Headphones in, volume low enough to hear approaching footsteps. Nothing upbeat, too jarring. No lyrics, too unpredictable. Instrumentals only. The bell above the shop door chimed gently as she entered the velvet page, her sanctuary of dog-eared worlds and low-traffic clientele. She ran the morning opening ritual without thinking. Unlock register, brew the shop's coffee, dust the front display. Every task had a beginning and an end. A box to tick. A sense of control. At 9:06, the door opened again. It was Mrs. Lambert, precisely as expected, ready to exchange last week's mystery novel and discuss her cat's latest drama. Alice smiled gently, offered her a copy of The Lake House Conspiracy, and listened. She liked this life. She had built it like a puzzle, every piece measured and placed until the edges matched perfectly. What Alice did not know, what she could not yet sense, was that tomorrow, someone would walk through that same door with boots still muddy from a trail, carrying the scent of wind and pine and something wild. Someone who would not follow any of her carefully drawn lines. But today, the world was still quiet, predictable, safe, and for now that was all she needed. Tuesday began like any other. Alice woke up at precisely 7 a.m., drank her chamomile tea before breakfast. She was trying to cut back on coffee, and read a chapter of her book before heading out. The day felt manageable. The sky was overcast, which suited her perfectly. Blue skies brought crowds, and crowds brought chaos. Today had the hush of cloud cover, the kind that kept things quiet. She arrived at the velvet page 2 minutes early, as always. By 9 a.m. the shop was humming softly, warm light spilling onto worn-wood floors. A jazz playlist filtered through the old speakers. The first customer, a quiet man looking for gardening books, barely spoke above a whisper. She liked days like this. Still water. No ripples. At 10:13, the bell above the door rang. Alice looked up instinctively, fingers resting lightly on the counter. The man who entered did not walk in so much as arrive. Like a gust. Like he'd just stepped through a forest and hadn't quite left it behind. His clothes were slightly damp, hiking gear, trail-worn boots, and a jacket dusted with dried mud and pine needles. His hair was wind-tossed, his cheeks pink from cold or exertion, and his eyes moved with the scanning curiosity of someone who never stayed in one place long. He paused in the doorway and took it all in: ceiling-high shelves, the wooden ladder, the ivy plant that curled down from a beam above the poetry section. Then he smiled like the room had just welcomed him in. "Is this place real?" he asked aloud, his voice bright, slightly amused. "Because I swear I nearly missed it." Alice blinked. He was talking to her. "Yes," she replied softly. "It's real." He stepped further in, leaving damp boot prints across the rug. Normally, that would have made her chest tighten. But oddly, it didn't, not right away. "I got turned around coming down the Ridge Loop Trail," he said, glancing around again. "Ended up in town, saw your sign. Thought, books and dry socks? Jackpot. Dry socks are in aisle 5, she said before she could think better of it. He laughed, a sudden, unrestrained burst. Alice felt the back of her neck warm. What was that? A joke. Did she just make a joke? He moved toward the travel section, trailing raindrops and a faint smell of cedar. His movements were loose, unscripted, entirely different from the slow precision of her regular customers. He ran his fingers along the spines of the books like he was meeting them. "I'm Kai," he said after a moment, glancing back over his shoulder. "Alice. Nice to meet you, Alice." He said her name like it had texture. He picked out a copy of Into the Wild, flipped it open, read the first line, and grinned. Then he added 2 more books without hesitation, On the Road and Vagabonding. Alice watched, transfixed. People didn't shop like that. People compared prices and read reviews. People planned. Not him. When he brought the books to the counter, she noticed a scar across the top of his right hand. It looked old, maybe from a fall. Maybe something wild. "I'm crashing in a cabin just outside town," he said casually, as he handed her a 20. "Trying to detox from cities. Thought I'd give the woods a chance to ruin me." "That sounds," she paused, "terrifying. Irrational. Reckless. Brave." Kai tilted his head. "You think so?" Alice nodded slowly. "Well then," he said, gathering his books into a canvas pack, "maybe I'll come back and tell you how it goes. See if I survive the squirrels." And just like that, he was gone, the bell above the door chiming behind him. Alice stood motionless for several seconds, her hand still resting on the counter, her pulse louder than usual in her ears. She didn't know his last name. She didn't know where exactly he was staying or why he had ended up in this quiet town. But she knew one thing for sure. He wasn't like anyone she had ever met. And he made ripples. Big ones. 3 days passed before Kai returned. Alice had convinced herself he wouldn't. People like him didn't follow through, not because they were unkind, but because they were in motion. Always. Like the wind. You didn't wait for the wind to come back. You let it pass. But on Friday, at precisely 11:23 a.m., the bell above the door rang again. Alice looked up, and there he was, brushing snowflakes from his jacket, cheeks flushed with the cold and eyes warm as firelight. "You made it," he said casually, as if they'd arranged it. "You said you'd come back," she replied. He smiled at that. "I'm reliable in unpredictable ways." That sentence felt like a riddle. It curled in her mind. He browsed only briefly this time, then approached the counter with no books in hand. "You have a favorite coffee place around here?" She hesitated. Of course she did. She had one. The Blue Fern Cafe, 3 blocks south, corner table by the window. She knew the barista's name, the best time of day to avoid crowds, how to order without stammering. It was a place of predictability, safety, routine. But going there with him? That was new. Still, something in his posture, casual but open, made her feel like she had room to breathe. Like the offer didn't require her to match his energy, only to show up with her own. "There's a place," she said slowly. "If you're okay with quiet." I like quiet, he said. It's just harder to find. They walked together in silence, the snow crunching beneath their feet. Alice felt her heartbeat in places she usually didn't notice: her ribs, her throat, her wrists. Her scarf was too warm, her coat suddenly too tight, but she didn't want to fiddle or retreat. He didn't ask her questions as they walked. Didn't fill the air. She was grateful. At the cafe, she led him to her usual table by the window. The waitress, Anna, gave her a knowing smile and a raised brow. Alice ignored it. Kai ordered a black coffee. Alice asked for chamomile. Tea at a coffee shop, Kai said, amused. It's safer. He tilted his head again. That's not a word people usually use about drinks. She smiled. It's not about the tea. He didn't push. Just nodded. Their conversation moved gently, like a river avoiding rocks. He asked her about books, which was the one topic she could speak on without trembling. She asked about his travels, and he told stories that sounded like chapters from another life. Hitchhiking in Patagonia, climbing a mountain barefoot on a dare, sleeping in a hammock in Costa Rica during a monsoon. She laughed more than she expected. Not loud laughter, but real. Still, her fingers fidgeted beneath the table. Her mind looped in the background, checking escape routes, rehearsing exit lines. She was having a good time and preparing to run. That was her normal. I talk too much, Kai said suddenly, as if he'd read her mind. No, you don't. You get quiet when I talk a lot. Makes me wonder if I'm pushing. She searched for the words, I think in echoes. He seemed to consider that. I like that, he said finally. Thinking in echoes. For a moment, silence sat between them. Not awkward, just full. Then Kai leaned forward, rested his forearms on the table. Would it be okay if I asked you something kind of personal? She hesitated. Yes, she said. Carefully. Do you ever want to go somewhere without knowing how it'll end? Just for the feeling of it. Alice froze. The answer was complicated. The answer was no, but also yes. No, because uncertainty was terrifying. Yes, because something inside her, a hidden part, a younger version, a dreamer she'd buried, ached for it. I think about it, she said. He nodded slowly. That counts. They finished their drinks. He didn't ask for her number. Didn't make promises. Just walked her back to the bookstore, said, See you around, Alice, and vanished into the snowfall again. She stood there for a long time after he left, watching the street through the shop window. It wasn't a storm inside her. Not quite, but something had shifted, like a compass needle nudging north. The invitation came a week later. Kai appeared at the shop just before closing, grinning like he was keeping a secret too big to hold. I found a trail, he said, leaning his elbows on the counter like a boy asking for a dare. It's short, easy, quiet. You'd like it. Alice's breath caught. Not because she didn't want to go, but because she did, and that was worse. A hike? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. You could call it a walk with personality, he teased. Just trees and air. No cliffs. Promise. Her mind jumped to all the things that could go wrong. Slipping on wet leaves, getting too far from cell service, saying the wrong thing, freezing up, being seen. What if she panicked in the woods? What if she had a full anxiety attack and he realized she wasn't someone to explore life with, just someone trying not to fall apart? I don't really do spontaneous, she said quietly. Kai's expression softened, but he didn't step back. How about this, he said. We plan it. Saturday. You pick the time. I'll bring snacks, and you bring your comfort zone. We'll negotiate at the trailhead. She wanted to say no. It sat on her tongue, practiced and easy. But a yes fluttered beneath it. Okay, she said. Saturday. 10. But if I say I need to turn back, we turn back. Kai nodded. Of course. You're the compass. Saturday came too quickly. Alice packed her bag like she was preparing for an expedition. Water, tissues, an emergency blanket, a small flashlight, backup phone charger, protein bars, peppermint oil, and her anti-anxiety meds. She checked the weather 4 times. It was clear. 48 degrees. No wind. Nothing unpredictable. Still, Her fingers trembled as she tied her shoes. She met Kai at the edge of the forest preserve just outside town. He was leaning against a wooden trail post, sipping from a thermos. "You came," he said, like he hadn't doubted her, even though she had. "You said snacks," she replied. He grinned and pulled out a small cloth bag. Inside were trail mix, 2 chocolate muffins, and a bottle of ginger lemonade. "Bribery is an underrated art," he said. "Ready?" She hesitated. Almost. They walked in silence at first. The trail was, as promised, easy, mostly flat, pine needles soft underfoot, the trees spaced wide enough that the light filtered in gently. No steep hills. No cliff edges. Just forest. Just the sound of their boots and the occasional bird overhead. Alice focused on the rhythm of her steps. When her heart began to race, she counted her breath. She noticed how Kai didn't fill the silence with stories this time. He just matched her pace. No pressure. "So," he said after a while, "what's your favorite book?" Her answer changed weakly, but she told him anyway. He nodded, told her his. Then they talked about the worst endings they'd read, the best first lines, the books that made them cry and the ones that saved them. It wasn't as hard as she'd feared. In fact, the walk helped. The motion. The steady cadence of their conversation. The grounded feel of the earth under her boots. They reached a small clearing about 40 minutes in, a patch of grass and wildflowers caught in a circle of light. Kai sat down without a word, unzipping the snack bag. Alice stood, unsure if she could settle. Stillness was the part that let the anxiety in. He didn't urge her. "You okay?" he asked, offering her a muffin. She nodded, but only barely. Her chest had gone tight. She wasn't panicking, yet, but she felt the tremble in her throat, the old familiar swell behind her eyes. Her brain whispered all its usual lies. "You don't belong here. He'll see it. You're too much. Or not enough." "I think I need to turn back," she said, almost a whisper. Kai didn't argue. He didn't try to coax her into staying or tell her she was fine. Instead, he stood, brushing his hands together. "All right," he said. "Let's go." Relief flooded her, but also confusion. "You're not disappointed?" He shrugged. "I asked you to come with me. Not to prove something." They walked back slowly. This time, Alice let herself feel the forest more, its quiet, its steadiness. She realized something strange. She wasn't afraid of the trail. She was afraid of being seen on the trail. But Kai didn't seem to be watching her like a puzzle. He wasn't waiting for her to stumble. He just walked with her. At the parking lot, before she opened her car door, she turned to him. "Thank you," she said. Kai smiled softly. "You did great." I turned back. "You came," he said. "You said yes. That's the hard part." Alice didn't say anything more. Just got in her car, turned on the engine, and sat for a long time, watching him fade into the rearview mirror. And for the first time in a long time, her chest didn't feel like a locked room. It felt like a door, slightly ajar. Alice didn't expect things to change. Not in the way they did. She thought maybe the hike had been a one-time collision, 2 different people brushing past each other in the woods. But the next day, Kai texted her a photo of the clearing they'd visited, now glowing in golden light. "You left too soon." The sun showed off. Alice smiled. Not a small smile, not polite, an involuntary, full-face kind of smile she wasn't used to giving. She wrote back, "Next time I'll stay 10 minutes longer." No promises after that. He responded, "I'll take 10 minutes. I'm greedy like that." After that, he became a presence, not overwhelming, not constant, but steady. Some mornings she'd open her phone to find a photo from the ridge or a voice note rambling about the texture of bark he'd found oddly satisfying. She sent back quiet pieces of her world, too. Her tea shelf alphabetized, a passage she'd underlined in a book, a haiku about nothing in particular. Their worlds were starting to overlap. One afternoon, he stopped by the shop just before closing, carrying 2 cups of hot cider and a crumpled paper napkin with a sketched map. "I want to show you something," he said. "Now?" "No," he said with a grin. "This weekend. I know you need lead time. But there's this little lake, tucked behind a trail that no one uses. You'd like it. It's still. Even the birds feel like whispers out there. She stared at the paper. Her calendar that week was blank, by her own design. He seemed to sense her hesitation. We don't have to go far. Or fast, he added. We can bring a book. You can read and I can pretend I understand it. She laughed quietly. You're assuming I'll read something intellectual. You look like you hide your trashy novels under literary fiction dust jackets. She raised an eyebrow. Maybe. He placed the cider on the counter. Think about it. No pressure. That was what made it different. Kai didn't push. He invited. She had never known that was possible. The lake trip didn't happen, not that week. It snowed, and Alice used it as a reason to cancel. Truthfully, the idea of being that far out again made her heart beat a little too fast. But he didn't take it personally. He just sent her a picture of the lake half frozen, sunlight skimming across the surface. Still waiting. No rush. Instead, they started spending time in her world. Kai would show up at the bookstore mid-morning and sprawl out on the old reading couch near the window, flipping through travel books and dog-earing pages like he was preparing for a life he hadn't planned yet. Alice would bring him tea and pretend she wasn't smiling when he made a mess of the pastry she gave him. Sometimes he stayed through closing, and they'd walk to the cafe. Once, he convinced her to go to the winter market. She didn't last long. It was loud and crowded, but he noticed before she had to say anything. He steered her out, gently, like it was the plan all along. You okay? He asked afterward. I didn't panic. You left before you had to. That's smarter than staying just to prove something. He was the first person who ever called her brave for leaving instead of enduring. One night, she invited him to her apartment. That was a first. They sat on her couch surrounded by books and sleepy jazz. He told her about a time he got food poisoning in Thailand and hallucinated a conversation with a gecko. She told him about the time she fainted in a college class because she hadn't eaten all day from worry. They laughed in that late-night way where the room feels smaller and bigger at the same time. He reached for her hand. She let him. His fingers were warm. Hers were trembling. Neither of them said anything for a long time. It didn't feel like a leap. It felt like a lean. Over the next weeks, the space between their lives kept narrowing, but not collapsing. She still needed time, quiet structure. He still craved motion, the edge of uncertainty. But they began to learn each other's languages. He stopped calling her careful like it was a flaw. She stopped calling him reckless like it was a warning. They weren't opposites. They were complements. Where she folded inward, he reached out. Where he scattered, she rooted. Together, they found something neither had quite known they needed. A middle ground. A place with sky and shelter. The unraveling didn't start with a fight. It started with a sentence. One that seemed harmless on the surface. They were in Alice's kitchen, small, tidy, full of plants and clean lines. The late afternoon light pooled through the windows, golden low, like honey pouring across her countertop. Kai was barefoot, making grilled cheese, humming off-key. She was curled at the table with a tea in hand, watching him with a half-smile. Then he said it. I've been thinking about Morocco. Her fingers stilled around the handle of her cup. There's this desert trek in the Atlas Mountains. 2 weeks. Wild skies. People sleep under the stars. He said it like it was a dream. Like he was already there. Alice tried to swallow the cold rise in her throat. When? Kai shrugged. Soon, maybe. Early spring. I haven't booked anything. Silence stretched between them. 2 weeks, she repeated. He turned toward her, spatula in hand. I mean, you could come. The words landed like a stone in the center of her chest. Come with him? To another continent? With no fixed schedule, no known variables, no safety net? She couldn't even spend a full day in the woods without rehearsing how to breathe. She laughed, but it came out sharp, brittle. Not funny. You know I can't do that. Kai blinked. I didn't mean. You always mean it, she said, the words spilling faster than she could edit them. You say things like that, and you mean them in that moment. But that moment always leads somewhere else. And I'm the one left behind trying to catch my breath. He looked stunned. Then hurt. Then quiet. I thought we were building something, he said carefully. We are, she said. Here. In my world. You came into my space. But this thing with you, it always wants to move. Always wants to go higher or farther or faster. That's not fair. Neither is being afraid all the time, she said, her voice cracking. You don't know what that's like. You don't know what it feels like to wake up every day and fight a war with your own mind before you even put on socks. You think I haven't fought things? His voice stayed calm, but the heat was rising. Not this. He looked at her like he was trying to find the part of her he could still reach. I didn't mean to make you feel like you weren't enough, he said, voice soft. I thought maybe you were growing into this. With me. Alice blinked fast. Her throat was closing. I was. I am. But I can't follow you off a cliff to prove it. The grilled cheese sat on the counter, burning slightly around the edges. He didn't move to save it. Neither did she. Kai left that night. Not dramatically. No slamming doors. No accusations. He just kissed her forehead, said, I'll give you space, and walked into the early dark. And suddenly, the silence she loved felt louder than a riot. The days after felt numb. She went to work, took her vitamins, read old poetry she didn't understand. The bookstore was quiet again, but now it felt empty, like someone had turned down the saturation on her life. She tried to convince herself this was better, safer, predictable again, back in control. But late at night, when the world blurred and her chest was hollow, she missed the mess of him. His contradictions, his endless movement, his warmth. She missed the version of herself she had started to become around him. Someone who said yes. Someone who laughed mid-panic. Someone who held a hand even when hers was shaking. And that was the hardest part. Missing him wasn't about him. It was about her. The her who believed she could be more than her fear. The postcards started arriving 2 weeks later. The first came in a plain envelope, postmarked Granada, Spain. It was handwritten on the back of a photo, terracotta rooftops and laundry lines strung across windows. The ink bled slightly from humidity. Alice. I got lost looking for a bus and ended up in a tiny plaza with music playing from 3 different apartments. A little girl gave me a slice of orange and didn't ask for anything in return. I wanted to tell you that. You always said chaos scared you. But sometimes it's just the sound of someone else living next door. I miss your quiet. Kai. She read it 3 times. Then tucked it between the pages of a book she'd never finished. More followed. One from Marrakesh, sun-scorched and smelling faintly of spices. Another from a seaside town in Portugal, where he swore the waves looked like watercolor arguments. One from a mountain village she had to look up on a map. He never asked her to reply. He never apologized. But each card carried pieces of him that felt oddly still. Like even in motion, he was sitting with her. The 4th postcard arrived on a Tuesday. She hadn't been expecting it, but her hands trembled anyway as she turned it over. The front was a photo of the Sahara, dunes curling like the edges of sleep. I'm not chasing something anymore. I'm not running either. I thought that's what I needed, movement, unpredictability, adrenaline. But what I keep thinking about isn't the mountains. It's you reading in silence. I keep wondering what you'd pack for this trip. Probably snacks. Definitely tea. Maybe your fears. But you'd still come. And I think that's more courageous than anything I've done. No expectations. Just missing you. K. Alice sat with that card pressed to her chest for an hour. Not crying. Not panicking. Just breathing. That night, she took out a notebook. Not her journal. The one that lived in a drawer and only held spirals. This one was blank. New. She began writing. Kai. I don't want to be followed. I want to be met. Somewhere between your cliffs and my quiet. I'm learning not to label every fear as failure. I'm learning that control isn't the same as peace. I don't know where I want to go, but I think I'm ready to walk toward it. Not alone. Alice. She didn't mail it. She wasn't writing to find him. She was writing to find herself. A week later, she did something unthinkable. She packed a small overnight bag. Nothing wild, no plane tickets, no time zones, no dunes. Just a weekend trip to a nearby coastal town, one she used to visit as a child. She booked the room in advance. She mapped every coffee shop. She made lists. It wasn't spontaneous, but it wasn't fear either. The drive was long. She cried once when her GPS rerouted. But she kept going. When she arrived, She found a bench by the sea and took out the last postcard. She turned it over. You'd still come. And I think that's more courageous than anything I've done. She smiled. Then she took a photo of her view, the ocean's soft waves, her boots in the corner of the frame, and sent it to Kai. No caption. Just the moment. A single drop in a long-distance ripple. The snow had mostly melted by the time Kai returned. Alice didn't know he was back until she heard the shop door's bell chime just before closing. Late March light pooling through the windows, soft and gold again, just like it had been the night of the grilled cheese and the fracture. She looked up from the register. There he was. Boots a little more worn, hair longer, skin tanned from a different sun. But quieter, too. Calmer. No wind this time. Just him. He didn't say anything at first. Just walked in like he'd been here yesterday, as if time hadn't stretched across oceans and postcards. Alice's breath caught, but her body didn't flinch. That surprised her. She'd grown. He noticed. Hey, he said. Hey. A pause. I wasn't sure if I should come, he added, voice gentle. You did, she said. So come in. He stepped closer, stopping just short of the counter. I got your photo. She nodded. I almost didn't send it. I almost didn't leave. Silence. Not awkward. Just full again. I missed you, she said, because there was no sense in hiding it now. But I needed that space. I missed you too, he replied. And I didn't know how much until I realized I wasn't chasing something anymore. She looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't glowing with adrenaline or lit up with motion. He looked grounded. Are you staying? She asked. He smiled, but not his usual grin. This one was smaller. More uncertain. More real. I don't know, he admitted. But I want to build something I don't have to leave to feel alive. Alice leaned against the counter. Her fingers didn't tremble. Her heart beat faster, but not out of fear. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached beneath the counter, pulled out a folded piece of paper. A hand-drawn map. Neat. Careful. Planned. She unfolded it in front of him. Road trip, she said. Short loops. Coffee shops. Hiking trails. Bookstores along the way. I already called the first 2 motels. Kai blinked, looking at it like it was treasure. Alice. You said we're opposites, she said. We're not. You just like the edge. I like the center. But there's a road between the two. And you made a map of it. I made space for both of us. Kai exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding his breath for months. When do we leave? Next week, she said. I need to pack, and panic at least twice. I'll bring snacks, he replied. She laughed. Then quietly she reached for his hand. He took it, no hesitation. No cliff this time. No leap. Just a road ahead. Curving. Open. And for the first time, Alice didn't need to see the end. She just needed to begin.